Hello human beings, Power Gamer here, and after many years of searching, I have finally discovered what it takes for a Zelda game to be considered a fan favorite entry. Exist.
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, one of the most popular Zelda games ever made, which isn't really saying much. Almost every Zelda game has gone through a period of being the most popular, but this is one of the few to hold that title for such a long time, which is impressive given how big of a follow-up it was. The game was originally going to be released for the NES like the previous two games, however, Nintendo later decided to release it for their new consoles, the Super Famicom in Japan and the SNES in the rest of the world. They were able to invest more time and money into the game thanks to the success of the previous two entries, and add a much larger world thanks to the newer hardware, although some intended features ended up being cut. The game was released on November 21st, 1991 in Japan, April 13th, 1992 in North America, and September 24th, 1992 in Europe. The game was a huge success, selling over 4.6 million copies, making it the 7th best-selling game on the SNES and the 3rd best-selling game of 1992, and the praise this game received was even higher than that of the first game. Many people called it not only one of the best games on the SNES, but also one of the best games ever made. And this certainly won't be the last time a Zelda game gets that kind of praise. Almost every Zelda game, or at least ones released on a home console, go through what I like to call the Zelda cycle. When it comes out, it's universally acclaimed and considered to be one of the best games ever made. Then people start to get sick of hearing about it and think it's overrated just because of that. Then people start to point out actual flaws with it and how they don't think it's as good as people said it was. And then years later, people start to appreciate it again. This has happened with almost every single major Zelda game ever made. Except this one.
A Link to the Past got universal acclaim when it first came out, and it still gets universal acclaim. So many people regard this as not only the best Zelda game ever made, but also the best game released on the SNES. And when that's the console that gave us Super Mario World, Mega Man X, Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, Super Metroid, and Final Fantasy VI, that's saying a lot. I have played this game before, and my thoughts on it were, well, we'll get more into that later. It's been a few years since I have played it though, so let's fire up the SNES Classic and get started.
Our story takes place in the land of Hyrule, but not exactly the same one as the previous games. Many years ago, the evil wizard Ganon stole the magical relic known as the Triforce, and whoever gains the Triforce will be granted one wish. Because of this, 7 wise men cast a spell on Ganon that banished him to another realm known as the Golden Land. But Ganon used his wish to gain ultimate power and transform the Golden Land into the Dark World, a parallel version of Hyrule filled with monsters. We open with a young boy known as Link waking up in the middle of the night after hearing a strange voice. His uncle Tony goes to Hyrule Castle and tells Link to not leave the house. Okay. Link grabs a lantern and manages to infiltrate the dungeon of the castle where he finds Uncle Tony wounded. He gives Link a sword and shield before dying, and Link finds Princess Zelda trapped in a cell. He then takes her to a nearby sanctuary for safety, and a priest tells Link that an evil wizard named Aidan, at least I think that's how that's pronounced, is attempting to kidnap 7 maidens, one of which being Zelda, who are descendants of the 7 wise men. He wants to use them to open a portal to the Dark World and release Ganon into the Light World.
Now this might sound a bit confusing, since Link technically defeated Ganon and saved Zelda at the end of the first game. Well, from this point on, pretty much every Zelda game is self-contained, while still taking place in the same universe, just at different points in time. Almost every game has Link, Zelda, Ganon, and Hyrule, but they're all different versions of them. It's pretty complicated, and just to give you an idea, this is the official timeline that the games follow. It gets really confusing, so for the sake of simplicity, just assume that every Zelda game has no connection to the other ones, unless it's explicitly stated.
In order to defeat Aidan, Link must travel across Hyrule and complete 3 dungeons to obtain 3 magical pendants. If he does so, he must then travel to the Lost Woods and claim the Master Sword, a legendary blade formed by the 7 wise men to slay evil. So Link sets off on his quest to do so. Jumping ahead a bit though, once he does, Aidan captures the 7 maidens and successfully opens a portal to the Dark World. So now it's up to Link to travel across the Dark World and save the 7 maidens to prevent Aidan from releasing Ganon into the Light World. The story is still simple, but it's more involved than the previous 2 games. Not only does it develop more as it goes on, but there's a lot more characters involved compared to previously where you were alone for the entire time. It's not an amazing story, but it's definitely an improvement. Since we're on the SNES now, the graphics have seen a tremendous upgrade. This game still holds up in terms of visuals. The colors and sprite work are fantastic, and the music has also seen an improvement. There's way more tracks that play throughout the game, and all of them sound great. The game goes back to the formula of Zelda 1, with it being from an overhead perspective. You once again can attack with your sword and use an extra item, but since we have more buttons this time, you have some more abilities. You can use the A button to perform certain actions like grabbing things or talking to people, and the X button brings up a map screen! An actually useful map screen! Yes! Finally! Took them 3 games to get to this, but better late than never. The controls were also improved, as Link can now move diagonally, which is really helpful, and instead of stabbing his sword, he swings it, which means you don't have to be directly in front of an enemy to hit them, and now you can hit multiple targets at once. The sword beam is gone, but Link can now charge his sword to perform a spin attack, which does increased damage and hits every enemy around him.
Like the previous 2 games, your goal is to travel to each dungeon and complete them so you can get the treasure inside.
The dungeons are much larger than they were before, but thankfully you have a more detailed map to help you out. There's a much heavier emphasis on puzzles in this game rather than combat. There's a more specific order of rooms you have to go to in this game as opposed to the previous 2 where you were free to go almost anywhere you want. They still have maps which give you the complete layout, compasses which reveal where the boss is, and small keys which let you open doors. But now each dungeon also has a big key which lets you open bigger doors and the big chest which contains the dungeon's special item. They always end with a boss and give you a heart container to increase your health. The dungeons I'd say are overall an improvement since they at least have more variety in how they look. Like the first Zelda game, you have a variety of extra items you can use. The boomerang, bow, and bombs return, and they mostly act the same. The difference is the bow runs on arrows instead of your rupee count, and bombs can now be picked up and thrown. And instead of 1 magic rod, there's 2. One that shoots fire, and one that shoots ice. They mostly act the same, but they do more damage to specific enemies. And while the rod in the first game had unlimited ammo, these ones use a magic meter much like the spells in Zelda 2. We still have bottles, which you can use to store potions, and now there's fairies which revive you upon death. Plus, you can get more than 1 bottle in this game. And there's 3 types of potions this time instead of 2. Red potions restore your health, green potions restore your magic, and blue potions restore both. For new items, we have the lantern, which acts similarly to the candle, only it can't burn bushes and only lights up dark rooms by lighting these torches. But they do cast a small aura of light around you, which is helpful. There's the magic hammer, which does huge damage and lets you pound things down. The book of Mudora, which lets you translate these tomes. The butterfly net lets you catch fairies and put them in a bottle. The magic cape turns you invisible and drains your magic meter. The mushroom, which you can give to this witch in front of the potion shop to get magic powder, which apparently does something, but I can never get it to work. The magic mirror lets you shift from the dark world to the light world, but not the other way around. The cane of Somaria lets you create blocks and platforms in certain locations. The cane of Birna creates a shield, which makes you invincible and drains your magic. The ocarina, or flute in the international version, lets you warp to various places around the map, but only in the light world. And these 3 medallions give you magic spells, which act as screen nukes. The only thing different is what element they seem to use. Quake uses lightning, Ether uses ice, and Bombos uses fire. But easily the best new item is the hook shot. It lets you damage enemies, grab items from a distance, and latch onto certain objects, acting as a grappling hook.
The items are one of the best things about this game, since they add a lot of variety to the puzzles and combat.
Fighting enemies is thankfully not as frustrating as previously. Not just because of the added mobility, but because the game doesn't swarm you as often as Zelda 1, and the sword isn't the length of a twig like in Zelda 2. The shield still isn't that great, but overall the combat is an improvement. There are still some really annoying enemies though. These skeletons jump back every time you swing at them. There's this thing in dungeons called a wall master, which is a giant hand that if it catches you, brings you back to the entrance of the dungeon, and if you kill it, it respawns infinitely. And worst of all are these things called hard hat beetles. Every time you hit them, you bounce backwards, and they're almost always near a pit, which can make you lose a heart, or even worse, fall to a lower floor. Heart pieces from the first game make a return, but the experience system from Zelda 2 is gone, so you can only increase your attack by getting sword upgrades, and you can't increase your magic meter at all. Once again, there's items that give you extra abilities. The Pegasus boots let you do this dash attack, the Zora flippers let you swim in water, the Power Glove and Titan's Mitt let you pick up rocks, and the Moon Pearl makes it so you stay normal when you enter the Dark World. The Dark World acts as an alternate version of the map. You can enter the Dark World via these warp tiles, and you can only exit by using the magic mirror. When you exit, it leaves behind this glitter patch, and walking back into it returns you to the Dark World. Before you get the Moon Pearl, you turn into this pink bunny, making you completely powerless, but after, you remain totally fine. The Dark World has the same structure as the Light World, but the overall layout is different. The biggest difference is the dungeons. The first 3 dungeons are in the Light World, and your goal is to get the pendants, but the last 7 are in the Dark World, and your goal is to collect these crystals, which free the 7 maidens. And thankfully, unlike the 2 previous games, the locations of the dungeons are marked on the map, and the ones in the Dark World are even numbered, showing you what order you need to do them in.
With the game having a decent map function and overall being less cryptic, that must mean we finally have a Zelda game you can easily beat without a guide. Nope.
Yep, we finally reached the point where I bring up my complaints, and people aren't gonna be happy because I have quite a few. While the game's nowhere near as cryptic as Zelda 1 and even Zelda 2, it still has some moments that are ridiculous. We'll get more specific as we go along, but my biggest problem is that while most of the items are found inside dungeons, many are also hidden in the overworld. Now most of these things, like the Magic Cape and Bombos Medallion, aren't a big deal since they're optional, but others, like the Pegasus Boots and Zora Flippers, are required to beat the game. There are some hints, like this old man telling you to go to Zora's domain, or this guy by telling you to throw something in a pool, but not only do you have to remember a lot of these, but other things have no hints at all, and if they do, I certainly couldn't find them. There were many times during my first playthrough of this game where I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and I spent 15 minutes to an hour just trying to figure it out, before consulting a walkthrough and realizing I missed an essential item. Yes, I know that's technically my fault, but I feel like the game should be a bit more helpful in telling you where essential items are. There is a fortune teller who can give you hints if you pay him, but the hints are not very helpful, and they don't change until you do what that one was required for. Take this hint, for example. I can open a hole by using a more powerful bomb. Okay, where is it? Beats me. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's very helpful.
Oh, and watch this. Remember that. It will be important later.
My other big complaint is that this game can honestly be pretty frustrating. It's easier than the previous two games, but there are still some things that are really freaking annoying. One of my biggest pet peeves in gaming is obstacles that you can't get rid of, and this game seems to be obsessed with those kinds of things. There's these skull things that bounce around the room and hurt you while also draining your magic. These things shoot fireballs every time you use your sword, and these ones just keep shooting them infinitely. Giant statues that shoot lasers at you if you look at them. Moving spiked things that return from the first game, and now some rooms have spikes on the floor. And these eyes on the walls that shoot lasers, and Christ, they are fast. Maybe these complaints have made it obvious by this point, but I don't think this game is as good as people say it is. My first playthrough of this game was not a very fun experience, and the combination of constantly dying and having no idea of where I was supposed to go made me want to give up on the game multiple times. But I kept going, and I found myself liking the game less and less as I played. Now, this playthrough, I definitely had more fun than I did before, but a decent chunk of that was because I actually knew what I was doing, and even then, I still wound up getting lost a couple of times.
I want to be clear, I did not go into this game thinking I wouldn't like it that much, but there are way too many things in here that just piss me off.
There are some things I do appreciate this game for. It was really important since it introduced a lot of staples for the Zelda series. We finally have actual characters you interact with on your journey instead of just generic NPCs like in the first two games. The shops aren't hidden like in the first game. There's these new fairy fountains where you can find basic fairies and great fairy fountains which have these giant fairies that fully restore your health. We have Kakariko Village, one of the most iconic locations in Zelda history, making its first appearance, and most importantly of all, cuckoos, which are chickens you can abuse as much as you want. Yeah, come here, you stupid little thing. This is for all the crap the game has been giving me. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. Oh, wait, what? What the? What's going on? Oh, no. Oh, God! Chicken swarm! Ah! This is also the first game to have rupees of varying value. Okay, that was kind of the case in the first game, but now it's more expanded. Green rupees are worth 1, blue are worth 5, and red are worth 20. And thankfully, it's much easier to get rupees in this game than previously. Weirdly, though, the most effective weapon in the game isn't the magic hammer, the master sword, or any of the spell medallions. It's pots. Seriously, if you pick up a pot and throw it at an enemy, it will almost always die immediately. I don't know why these things do so much damage, but I'm not going to complain since they make things like skeletons and hard hat beetles much easier to deal with. Plus, picking them up is one of the only reliable ways to find health and magic restoration in dungeons, because hearts are way less common than they should be, which leads to a lot of annoying beeping when you're low on health.
Smells like it's time to get into the actual dungeons.
Well, we start with the basement of Hyrule Castle, where we save Zelda and find the boomerang, as well as bombs which are just lying around. After dropping her off at the sanctuary, we go to the desert, where we find this old man named Steve, and go to the first real dungeon, which is the Eastern Palace. It's a fairly standard first dungeon, nothing too special about it. Here we get the bow, and the boss is the Armos Knights. They're these 6 jumping knights, and they're fairly easy. Just hit them enough times and they disappear. You'll want to hit them all sporadically instead of just taking them out one at a time, since the last one standing gets stronger. Return to Steve, and he gives you the Pegasus boots, allowing you to get the Book of Mudora in this library. Use this book to translate this stone, letting you enter the Desert Palace. Again, this dungeon's nothing special. You get the Power Glove, and the boss is these worms called the Land Mola. They pop out of the ground, and you can only hit them after they leave or before they re-enter. You can then use the Power Glove to climb Death Mountain, where you find the magic mirror and have to avoid these falling rocks. Thank God they put a checkpoint here. At the top, you find the Tower of Hera, and this place stinks. It's filled with hard hat beetles and holes everywhere that send you down to lower floors. It's super tedious, and I hate it. This dungeon has the Moon Pearl, and the boss is Moldorm.
Fuck you worthless piece of shit! You can fuck right off and shove a mountain of shit up your you goddamn worthless shitty son of a bitch!
This is the worst video game boss I have ever fought in my entire f***ing life. This worm is a piece of shit who never should have been thought of. So what makes him the spawn of Satan, you might ask? It is constantly running around, and all you have to do is hit it on the end of its tail with your sword. Sounds easy, right? Oh, no. This thing has no pattern, and there is no strategy involved. You just have to run around mashing the sword button and hope you hit it. But if it runs into you, or you hit it anywhere other than the tail, it bounces you back. And if you fall off the platform, you go down to the previous floor. And Moldorm recovers all of its health every single time you fall! There are a bunch of pots with hearts in them on the floor below, but those hearts can only be collected one time each. Oh yeah, sure, that's fair. You can remember how many pots I broke, but you can't remember how many times I hit the fucking boss! This is one of the worst things I have ever done in a game, and the world would genuinely be a better place if this piece of shit never existed. This goddamn boss!
I have been holding that in since I first played this game 4 years ago.
Now that that nightmare is over, we can head to the Lost Woods to get the Master Sword. Not only does it do more damage, but it also gives you the Sword Beam. It's been nerfed though, and now it does half the damage of a normal sword hit. Zelda telepathically communicates to you to say she's been captured, and you have to return to Hyrule Castle. Reach the top, and you have to fight Aghanim. He shoots energy balls at you, and you have to bounce them back at him with the sword, all while avoiding lightning blasts and these things. You defeat him, but he succeeds with his plan and sucks you into the Dark World. Now we have to save the 7 maidens, head to the Dark Palace, and dark is right, because these people clearly didn't pay the electric bill. You get the magic hammer, and the boss is the Helmasaur King. You have to smash his mask with the hammer and then attack him. While you're doing this, he spits fireballs and swings his tail at you. Not too hard, but not too easy. Next up is the Swamp Palace, and this is the first time you actually need the Zora Flippers. Water, water everywhere, and it's not that interesting. You get the hookshot here, which automatically makes it one of the best dungeons in the game. The boss is Aurgus, and you have to use the hookshot to yank these cheese puffs off of him before using the sword. It's the same formula as the previous boss. Use your new item to make them vulnerable, and then attack.
And this is where we get to one of the stupidest things in the game.
The only way to access the rest of the Dark World is to cross this river, and the only way to do that is to hookshot this skull rock. Sounds simple, but there's a catch. The rock is off screen! The only way you can see this rock is if you're swimming in the river. And did you see it when I jumped in earlier? Because I sure didn't when I first played this. Seriously, would it have been that hard to move it 2 pixels to the right? Now you can reach the Skull Woods. This dungeon is annoying because you have to constantly go in and out, and the layout is really confusing. And you better not die outside, because then you go all the way back to the pyramid in the middle of the Dark World. You get the fire rod, and the boss is Mothula. It sucks. You have to hit it while the floor is constantly moving, and you have these moving spikes surrounding you. It's a pain, and if you die, it takes ages to go through the whole dungeon again. Next dungeon, Gargoyle's Domain. There's a whole lot of floors, and you get the Titan's Mitt, and in the basement, you find this girl. Thing is, if you blow up this part on the top floor and go to the room below it, the sunlight turns her into a monster called Blind. It flies around and loses its heads, which shoot fireballs as you attack it. Now you can save this guy and bring him back into the light world to get the Tempered Sword, which increases your damage. In this lake, we find the Ice Palace, and this is the worst dungeon in the game. The floor is slippery, and it just goes on and on and on. You get the Blue Mail Armor, which increases your defense, and the boss is Cold Stare. Use the fire rod to thaw him out, and then slash the cotton candy. On to Misery Mire. We're almost done. You have to go into the light world and head up Death Mountain to use the Book of Mudora to get the Ether Medallion, which as far as I know, the game doesn't tell you about, because of course. Then head to the swamp area and use Ether to get inside. This place is a giant maze. It's pretty annoying. You get the Cane of Somaria, and the boss is Vitrios. He'll shoot the small eyes at you and then zap you with lightning. Just keep hitting them until the big eye jumps out and you can kill it. Honestly, one of the best fights in the game. Only one dungeon left, Turtle Rock. Go up Death Mountain for the 3rd time and walk up this small mound. Then find this warp tile and use Quake to open the door. Make sure you bring a magic potion to this place. You're gonna need it. You have to use the Cane of Somaria to create platforms so you can ride on these rails. It takes ages, and this part right here is miserable because it's incredibly confusing which way you need to go. You get the Mirror Shield, which protects you from these eye lasers, and the boss is this Hydra called Trinex. You have to hit the blue head with the fire rod and the red head with the ice rod.
And if you've been paying attention, you realize that I never said where you get the ice rod. That's because this is hands down the worst example of the game hiding an essential item in a random spot in the overworld.
The ice rod is hidden in a small cave in the bottom corner of the light world. And tell me, what would motivate someone to come here outside of sheer morbid curiosity? Absolutely nothing. And the first time I played this game, I had no idea the ice rod even existed. So you know what I had to do? I had to go back to the entrance, re-enter the light world, warp to the bottom, find the cave, get the ice rod, stop by the potion shop, get back to the cliff to return to the dark world, and make my way back to the boss. That is bullshit. This is literally the only time in the game the Ice Rod is needed. The boss itself isn't that hard, you're just gonna need as much magic as possible to beat it. Once the 2 main heads are down, you have to hit this orange part a couple of times. And that's the last of the 7 maidens. Use the crystals to remove the barrier on Ganon's tower so we can prevent Aghanim from releasing him. This place is huge, but it's thankfully nowhere near as bad as Death Mountain or the Great Palace. Go through the entire basement to find the red mail, which increases your defense even more. On the higher floors, we have a rematch with the Armos Knights, Lan Mola, and... Oh, thank God, he's much easier this time. At the top of the tower, you have a rematch with Aghanim, and this time he makes clones of himself, which just gives you more chances to hit him. After he's defeated, it's revealed that Aghanim was just a puppet being controlled by Ganon the entire time. He then goes flying and crashes through the pyramid. Now, let's finish this. But wait, remember that more powerful bomb I mentioned earlier? Well, turns out the equivalent of Link's house in the Dark World is a bomb shop, and after you beat the Ice Palace, you can purchase a super bomb. Bring it to this cracked wall on the pyramid, and you find a secret fairy fountain you can throw something into. Throwing your sword in gives you the final upgrade, which is nice, and throwing the bow in gives you the silver arrows, which is mandatory to defeat Ganon.
Why do Zelda games keep doing this?
The game does actually tell you this, but you have to fall off the edge during the fight, so it is very easy to miss. Also, because the super bomb isn't available until much later in the game, it's very likely you'll dismiss the bomb shop as nothing important. So once you get the silver arrows, head into the pyramid and face off against Ganon. Slash him with the Master Sword while he spins his spear, flies around, and shoots fire at you. After a while, he makes the floor disappear and the room goes dark. You have to use the fire rod to light these torches to make him reappear, hit him with the sword, and shoot him with a silver arrow. After 3 arrows, he's gone. Once he's destroyed, Link finds the Triforce and its essence speaks to him and explains how it works. Link touches it and makes a wish to restore everything back to normal. We then get a credits sequence which shows us all the characters we've met throughout the game. And look, Uncle Tony is back as well. Link returns the Master Sword to its pedestal and the game comes to an end.
Game conquered. I'm sure it's obvious by this point, but I don't think A Link to the Past is as good as people say it is. It's still a good game, don't get me wrong. I just don't see it as the masterpiece that everyone else does.
While I did enjoy this playthrough more than my first one, a big part of that was because I had the experience. Not only did I know what to do, but I was also better at playing it. Let me put it to you this way. When you beat the game, it shows you how many games you played, which is how many times you died plus how many times you saved and quit. This playthrough had 41. My first one had 144. Yeah, needless to say, my first playthrough was not a very enjoyable one, and because of that, I can't say this game is great. That is biased, I'm aware, but that doesn't change the fact that I had an experience with this game that was not very fun. It's not the best SNES game, and far from the best Zelda game.
I do have more respect for it after playing the first 2 Zelda games, but I still don't like it very much, and I don't see myself playing it again. I feel like everyone has at least one Zelda game they're not a huge fan of, and for me, that's A Link to the Past. But more concerningly, the cuckoos are still out there, and I have to stop them. From this point on, I officially declare war on all chickens.